I will make mistakes and I will ban real money players because they seem like bots. I do not recall any real money player ever coming forward and saying I was banned because I seem like a bot.
The fact is we didn't ban enough. We didn't ban enough people. We wanted to go after bots, and we realized that it's hard to differentiate them.
How are you doing today? Welcome back to Andreas Ready Poker. In today's video, I'm just going to talk about Joeingram's Poker Live podcast with Phil Nagy and poker bots. I just finished listening to the podcast, and I had to say that I just found some things that I want to comment on. For example, let's start with the winners. There was a quote, "Winners look very similar to bots." It was brought up like 2 or 3 times to Phil Nagy, and I just have to say, yeah, very infrequently. I mean, if you look through all the winners in PLO, for example, inside like PokerStars, they all play so differently. I mean, they just couldn't be any more different. It's just some people donk bet more on the flop, some people c-bet more out of position, some people have different 3-betting ranges and squeezing ranges pre-flop, like just all over the place, right? So if you have data that 30 accounts are playing exactly the same, like literally if you have that spreadsheet, and I hope they're going to talk after the podcast a little bit about that spreadsheet and looking at these stats, how can you not assume these accounts are bots? Like, it's just not possible. At least freeze them for a week or 2 and try to come up with more justification in order to then eventually ban them and refund some money. Because, it has been the same when, these bot rings have been banned on PokerStars like 2 years ago. They just were playing all the same. And if you have that data, just use it, right? And not always ignore it. And at least after this podcast, there's not going to be excuses if that's not happening. Then also, in general, there has to be a better verification process in poker. We're in 2019 and going into 2020, it's not going to get any better with bots. So we need a verification process in general that's much better, much stricter, so that people cannot just always have new accounts set up that easily, that it just takes a lot longer for them to do that. And then after all, Latvia has about 2 million inhabitants, at some point, the amount of accounts are going to be over at least the ones that are, legally 18. So, maybe they're going to be run out of people at some point in those smaller countries and they have to find some new passports to use for their accounts. Who knows? Jokes aside, verification process, clear thing to cut some of the creation of these bots. And these bots also have to be funded at the beginning, right? And they have to basically, if they're not funded for a lot of money, they have to be funded on by playing maybe micro stakes or mid stakes or whatever. And so they have some risk as well. So let's say a bot is funded with a couple of $1,000 and it gets just detected very quickly and ends up not making enough money. Creating these bots can actually become a really expensive thing. So there is going to be more risk for the people who run those bots. What I think is more or tougher in general is going to be detecting people who collude. So that there are actually players who know a little bit about, for example, pot limit Omaha, and they just collude by using card removal. So let's say one guy is folding the ace king of spades and 2 other cards. And then some guy has the queen X of spades and makes a flush. Therefore, that player then has the nuts and can barrel off 3 streets for value. But again, these things can be filtered. If you have the hand histories, filter for exactly this spot. It's the perfect one where just filter for people value betting these types of hands and then just look out after tens of thousands of hands if that's like a constant thing and who's on the table when that happens. I'm sure that if you have a big enough sample, even though monotone boards don't really represent like that many boards, like 5% or something, then you're gonna find patterns. Again, I think Phil Nagy has mentioned that it's either an all or nothing approach to some situations. And I just doubt that if you put in a lot of time and effort into spotting these things, it can be that hard if you have the necessary data. The only thing that can happen is that actually the bots are making a ton of money over a short period of time and then basically take off their profits and then create a new bot and then basically don't get detected. But again, that, speed of basically finding them just has to be increased, and the beginning of the verification has to be better. And also, a lot of the criticism on the chat, specifically in the Poker Live podcast, has been that the refunds have been kind of a joke. And yeah, I have to say that if you're refunded like $1 to $5, most likely you've been scammed for a lot more money by those bots. You know, like, yeah, have you just played like one hand or, I don't know, 50 hands against these bots? Most likely not. Most likely you probably lost a lot more money against these bots, and the refund should have been bigger. So, you know, a little bit of transparency, which has been mentioned a lot in the live podcast. I just cannot believe that, because, you know, these numbers, they just have been mentioned in the chat, and I'm sure these are no exceptions. And there's no proof, you know, for these refunds and the amounts that have been issued on whether that's actually something that was, you know, that made sense in terms of the amount. So we cannot know that, of course. And only time will tell whether some of the things that have been discussed will be implemented on the site. You know, some added things to the software that can be done. I've been talking about it on this channel as well, but running once poker, using Splash the Pot, using any mechanism that can trick the bots into potentially making errors that a human wouldn't do. For example, like a misdeal has been mentioned, which I find really interesting. If you have the software make misdeals once in a while, and the bot basically not recognizing that there has been new cards dealt, that would be actually quite hilarious if then they made a really huge mistake based on that. I don't know how that could be in reality, like putting like a second deck over the first deck and then the bot somehow not recognizing that. That would be pretty cool, to just throw that in once in a while in order to prevent bots. I mean, maybe you have some creative ideas for bots. Let me know in the description below. Maybe you have some cool idea, and who knows, this might be a breakthrough. I mean, bots are still pretty new. I mean, it's just still a couple of years. And I'm sure that any measurements like Splash the Pot or these misdeals or whatever might be actually tricking the bots in some way. And then we have to deal with less people cheating on online poker. It's going to be all about the collusion, and that's going to be much tougher, I guess. But it's also tougher to execute collusion in a smart way. So, you know, that might be not a thing that's happening in the masses nearly as much. And then, you know, very smart people can maybe outsmart those smart cheaters. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget, this is YouTube. If you want to see these videos in the future, hit the like button, hit subscribe if you want to, you know, watch my videos in the future here. And then thanks for watching. See you for the next one.